Have you ever heard of the dark web? If you haven't, I'll tell you what it's all about. The dark web is a part of the internet that lets people hide their identity and location from other people and the authorities. It helps people commit crimes without being traceable, as well as get in touch with other criminals. What you're about to hear are two true life stories of people who used the dark web, but things didn't end up as they expected. When people talk about the dark web and how it can let them do shady things and get away with it, it bothers me because the dark web is not a place anyone should be meddling with. I mean, unless you're capable of handling the consequences that might come with using the dark web, then you have no business with it. I'm saying this because I had a friend who got entangled with the dark web 4 years ago, and it nearly ruined his life. I got his permission to share his story, and for the sake of anonymity, I'll be using fake names for this story. So let's call my friend Jack, and we'll call his ex-girlfriend Cindy. I'll keep this story as short as possible. Jack and Cindy were lovers from their college days. At least from what I had seen, I could say that they both loved each other so much. They were the perfect couple. After 4 years of dating and almost 2 years of living together, Cindy called it quits with no good enough reason for wanting to end things. Jack loved Cindy so much that he tried everything possible to make things work, but Cindy's mind was made up. She told Jack that she needed a break, but it turned out that she had been seeing someone else, which was why she ended things with Jack. After Cindy left Jack, Jack became a shadow of himself and was pretty messed up like everyone else after a breakup. Jack hated that Cindy abandoned all their plans and the promises she made to him. And above all, she shattered his heart into 1,000 pieces. Because he was filled with hate and anger at Cindy for leaving him, Jack decided to take revenge on her. And that was when Jack got involved with the dark web. His revenge plan was to hire someone on the dark web to hack into Cindy's social media accounts and post negative and embarrassing things about her. In less than a day of surfing the dark web, he found a guy named Chris. After Jack and Chris had a long conversation about what he wanted, Chris agreed to do everything for a certain fee, and Jack agreed. To get the job done, Chris claimed he needed Jack and Cindy's personal information, and without thinking about the consequences of sharing their personal information with a total stranger, Jack gave Chris everything he needed. Just as the two had agreed, Chris did the job he'd been paid for, and Jack believed that would be the end of their work relationship. Unknown to Jack, that was just the beginning of his nightmare. About a week after Chris hacked into Cindy's social media accounts and posted those negative things, he began to send messages to Jack, threatening to expose what he had done if Jack did not pay him some money. He claimed that he needed the money to stay quiet. At first, Jack was scared about Chris exposing the truth, so he paid him the amount he requested. Unfortunately, things did not end there. Chris continued to blackmail Jack into paying him a ridiculous amount of money every month. But after a couple of months, Jack couldn't take it anymore. The money he was giving to Chris was affecting the quality of his life, and he had to struggle to live off the little money he had left after paying Chris. Sadly, when Jack could not meet Chris's demand that month, Chris carried through with his threats. He created fake social media accounts with Jack's pictures and began posting a lot of negative things, fake information, and fake pictures while pretending to be Jack. Since Jack was well known on those social media platforms, Chris's impersonation ruined his reputation, costing him a lot. Also, because of the negative things Chris had been posting, Jack lost his job too. The worst was that he couldn't even report Chris to the police because he was also guilty of trying to tarnish another person's image and reputation. I'm pretty sure if only Jack had known what visiting the dark web would cost him, he would never have gotten involved. Though it's been years, it took him a really long time to get back on his feet. One of the reasons I'll never be a fan of doing anything on the dark web is because I've literally seen the consequences of using the dark web completely destroy my cousin's life. It's quite sad I have to use his life story to warn others who think their secrets are safe and hidden on the dark web. My cousin Eric was only 22 years old when his life turned upside down. all because he decided to buy drugs from the dark web, and he ignorantly shared his friend's home address as the delivery location. According to Eric, that was not the first time he'd used the dark web to do some things, but unluckily for him, this particular day cost him years of his life. Back to the story. So after Eric had gone on the dark web to buy some drugs, he went over to his friend's place, which was the location he had given to his supplier. A few minutes after he got to his friend's place, his package arrived, and he and his friend, Ben, ended up using the drugs together. Eric and Ben were best friends. They had a thing for buying drugs and using them together. Sometimes they hung out at Eric's house, and sometimes they would hang out at Ben's house. This is to say that it wasn't the first time they were using drugs together. They did it all the time, and had never gotten into any kind of trouble. Unfortunately for them, something happened that day that had never happened before. Ben overdosed on the drugs. He had to be taken to the hospital. Since the particular drugs Ben overdosed on was the same type of drugs that was linked to several deaths in that area, the police got involved. Upon questioning Ben and Eric about how they got the drugs, Eric lied about the dark web, and he told the police he had gotten the drugs off the street. What Eric and Ben did not know was that the police could tell they were lying, and they decided to watch them closely. After the overdose incident, Eric and Ben decided to stay away from drugs for a while. But exactly 2 weeks after Eric paid for the drugs on the dark web, something strange began to happen. Without ordering more drugs, someone began to deliver several bags of drugs to Ben's house. For a week, the packages came in almost every day, and neither Eric nor Ben could explain what was going on. Since the packages contained a greater quantity of the same drugs Eric purchased from the dark web, he suspected that the same person could have been sending him drugs. He even tried to contact whoever it was, but he'd been blocked, so there was nothing he could do. Around the same time this was happening, the police still had Ben's house under surveillance. As I mentioned earlier, they knew Eric and Ben had lied about their drug source, wanted to find out who their supplier was. Long story short, the police ended up arresting Ben and Eric for something they had no idea about. Turned out that the drug dealer with whom Eric carelessly shared Ben's home address had framed them up, and they had no idea why. Ben and Eric were ultimately sentenced to prison, and it took a very long investigation before they could clear their names. Eric's mistake was not just visiting the dark web, but sharing his best friend's address with a stranger. As of the time I'm sharing this story, Eric is no longer in prison, but his experience with the dark web has scarred him for life. So when teenagers and others make a fuss about the dark web and how it makes them invincible, I always tell them Eric and Ben's story, so they know how the dark web can really darken their lives if things go wrong.